Get on your back. Stay there. See what you made me do? Guess what? This is all supposed to be a scam.
We are talking Terrorized. Terrorized? You see what they did there? This one is directed and written by Delaney Bishop, and dare I say it is a somewhat experimental film in some ways. So the story here is one where there is this kind of social media platform, kind of like YouTube, I suppose, and it's become kind of underground popular with a lot of people, somewhat of a dark web phenomena, you might say, but it is kind of becoming more popular. And it's essentially where people put up videos, and it ranges from pranks down to kind of like crime. So people capturing murder and stuff like that. So you get people deliberately committing crime to put on this site, and you know it's having its kind of stars, if you like. So it kind of reminds me of The Purge for the social media generation in some ways. And the story focuses on kind of 3 to 4 people. It's kind of hard to describe. But basically they're going to Coachella. There's this our male lead, who is this guy who is engaged to his girlfriend. His girlfriend is having an affair with his older brother, but his younger brother, who we'll come on to in a minute, it also seems to may have had a bit of an obsession with her. There's also her friend, who was once the lover of her boyfriend. So there's somewhat of a convoluted mix of relationships here. But ultimately it comes down to 4 people going on this trip. Now we've got the kind of the older, kind of the middle brother, I suppose, who has got this girlfriend. The girlfriend herself, who's having an affair with the older brother, and then her mate, who used to be this middle brother's ex. Plus you have our young brother, who is the kind of maybe the antagonist, and he's this kind of disfigured guy who was hurt in an accident some years ago, and has kind of ultimately been the pioneer behind this kind of channel, this Terrorized, this kind of TV channel which popularises crime and snuff, really, to be honest. So these 4 people are going to Coachella, but they're being constantly filmed, sometimes unbeknownst to them, sometimes by their own hands, and this is getting kind of televised on this Terrorized channel, and it's being commentated by very many people, and we see one guy who's kind of commenting it, but we see lots of text comments and things as well, and they are pursued by some other kind of content creators who want to kind of like confront them for one reason or another. And that's kind of all I'll go on to the plot. Now you may be getting the impression here that the plot probably is going to be where this movie falls down, and it is, and we'll come on to it. But let me talk about what I think works first of all. I think this movie's main strength here is its somewhat original approach to how it kind of is coming at this as a kind of a media narrative, so to speak. So it's very much of the OnlyFans, the Instagram, that kind of generation where everything is, you know, instantly kind of critiqued or uploaded and things like this, and the narrative is shaped by people who are on social media and influencers, dare I say that word. And I think it's an interesting take on this kind of this new, you know, situation that the world finds itself in, with people having these, you know, trying to find fame through whatever means kind of necessary. And there's a little bit of commentary on that. And I think it's, you know, it makes for a kind of an interesting idea that may feel alien to maybe people who are slightly older, maybe my generation, perhaps, who are, you know, more middle-aged, and kind of it feels quite alien and somewhat kind of is a world we don't quite understand, and kind of things. So therefore it feels a little bit kind of you know, dangerous, because we don't really know what's kind of going on. We don't really know, you know, who these people are behind the keyboards and things like that. And, you know, when we see the comments coming up on screen and people seeming to really kind of have their morals taken out of the kind of situation because they're just viewing things behind a computer screen. I gotta say, I think there's some interesting ideas here. Do I think the movie fully explores that? Hell no, I don't. But I gotta say, I appreciate the questions at least being asked, if not fully kind of developed. And I gotta say that I couldn't really tell where this movie was going. Again, it's kind of a good and a bad thing. Because you don't really know who you're rooting for, because all of the characters in this particular film seem very flawed. You know, our main male lead, for example, used to have you know, an affair with the friend of his girlfriend. There may well have some kind of like history with his younger brother, who is this masked, you know, chap who can't speak and has been kind of mangled through an accident, and we'll learn more about that. An antagonistic relationship with his older brother. The girlfriend's having an affair. You know, her friend still harbours feelings for the boy. So all of these people are kind of like have very complex kind of relationships with each other, and you know, are not great people at the end of the day. And it's like, I don't know where this movie is going. I'm not really quite sure who to root for. And as I say, it's a good and bad thing, because you don't have that traditional kind of protagonist that you're kind of rooting for. But at the same time, you know, you don't quite know where the story's going. So you feel a little bit disconnected from it. But at the same time, I feel this movie is almost doing it on purpose, because it kind of wants you to have this sense of alienation of it. I feel like maybe I'm overthinking this film, to be honest. Let me just dive into some of the negatives here, because I really have to kind of fill the this kind of section by saying that the main problem with this movie is it's narratively very confusing, because you don't really understand what you're watching, because the movie doesn't do, I don't think, a good enough job of telling you kind of what is going on and the kind of the world that this movie inhabits. So the kind of the younger brother, who is this kind of like this masked one, I'm thinking, is he on this trip or isn't he? Because he seems to be in some shots and not others. We see very little interaction between him and kind of the other characters. So I'm thinking, I'm not entirely sure if he's there or not. And again, the movie's trying to be kind of somewhat vague purposely, but it kind of makes the movie a little confusing. And again, it's just the way this kind of this social media platform is set up, I don't think is fully realised. You know, how big is it? How many people are on it? Because they just seem to kind of run into people who are on it. They have digital masks, but they only seem to kind of work sometimes. So, and things like this, and the world to me just isn't fully kind of like fleshed out. And the story just seems to be somewhat kind of directionless, to be honest. I've got to say, in a way that works in their favour, because it makes it a little bit of an unpredictable story, because you don't quite know what you're watching. So this to me feels like a concept of a film that has yet to be fully realised, if that makes sense. And I do think there are some interesting ideas here that could make a more coherent film. But the problem is that the movie as it is now seems very discombobulated, quite hard to follow, with characters that we don't really feel connected to, and a premise that we don't really understand. It's also way less violent than I was expecting. With this kind of, when you have, like, you know, the dark web, and you have all these kind of like, you know, people watching snuff films and things like this, you're kind of expecting to see some dark stuff on camera, and the movie doesn't really go there. And I think that if he wanted to kind of maybe get more of a cult following, it should have gone more in that direction and really lent into the kind of like the underground seediness that this movie is trying to kind of, you know, depict that it's there, but it never really kind of fully commits and kind of goes into it. Instead, you know, the worst we kind of see is a couple of kind of gunshots and things like this. Even when we get people beaten and stuff, we never kind of see anything. The movie is somewhat of a found footage movie, or there are certain sequences that are not. So it's a kind of somewhat of a hard film to categorise, and that in itself, I think, is part of the problem. I think a lot of people may watch this film and dismiss it because it just is a mess. And it is a mess. There's no getting around it. This movie is very messily made. But I do think there is some interesting stuff that it is trying to do. I don't think it's particularly successful, but I've got to say, I think had it had a bit more development, maybe some producers that were kind of push back on the writer-director's kind of like more abhorrent kind of instincts and things like this, and try and make it a little bit more kind of accessible and streamlined and more kind of, character driven perhaps, it could have been more successful, or going to go into the real kind of grindhouse violent route and make it a kind of cult film. But as it stands at the moment, it feels like a filmed experiment that is yet to have its final form. So as it stands, should you watch this movie? It's an interesting one. It's kind of original, but ultimately it feels like an unfinished first draft. So I'll give it a 4 out of 10, slightly below average, because I honestly don't think it is. You can say this movie is a well-made film. It's not. It doesn't have a good narrative flow. There's some ideas here, but it's just a bit rocky. It needs more smoothing out. 4 out of 10 for me. Have you seen it? What do you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.